I made a game in 4 days. I recently finished my first game jam and I really enjoyed it, so I was eager to do another one. After looking around on itch.io, I saw that the Thinky Games puzzle game jam was on. This game jam, believe it or not, specialises in puzzle games, and I would have 4 days to finish my game. A much shorter time frame than my first game jam, but a fun challenge. So I decided to enter, and this is how it went. The reason this jam caught my attention was because when I was brainstorming ideas for my last jam game, one of my ideas was a procedurally generated murder mystery game like Murdle. Murdle is an online game where daily puzzles are generated with 3 suspects, 3 locations, 3 weapons and a culprit. There are a bunch of generated clues that leave only one possible solution for the player to deduce. I passed on this idea at the time because I didn't know how these puzzles worked under the hood and I wanted to pick a nice simple idea. However, as I worked on my last game jam, I kept thinking about Murdle and its procedurally generated puzzles, and I worked out a system for generating them myself. Keeping it simple, my idea was that the program starts with 3 people, 3 locations and 3 weapons, and it comes up with every possible combination of them. Then, our clues come with a function which takes a set of possibilities as an input, removes all possibilities that can't be true according to the rules of that clue, and then returns the remaining possibilities. By starting with every possibility and applying a chain of clues in sequence, we are left with one possibility, then we have a working puzzle with a unique solution. If we overshoot and rule out all possibilities, we just restart and go again. So I made a few very basic template clues and put together a puzzle generator which, sure enough, generates a set of clues that yield a unique solution. With this proof of concept complete, I brainstormed a bit about what the game should be. The optional theme of the jam was rare animals, so I thought, what if instead of solving a murder, we solved the theft of a rare animal? This idea seemed neat enough, so my next step was deciding what the rare animal would be. After coming up with a little list of ideas, I had an even better idea. I could use the list to randomly pick the rare animal each time the game is played. I decided to lean hard into this Mad Lib-esque direction and made it so the name of the player and the name of the case were also Mad Lib. Could be a detective, professor or Gary, and solve the case of a stolen rhino, zebra or even a cow. I also decided that the game loop would be visiting different locations and playing a minigame at each to earn a clue, kind of inspired by the gameplay in World of Horror. My little test of the clue system from before seemed to consistently give 6 to 8 clues for a puzzle, so I decided 10 locations and 10 clues would be a nice round number and it would give the player some space to fail the minigames. Next came the art. At the time of the jam, I had recently finished my first game jam, and while I am proud of my pixel art for it, I felt the colours were a bit off. Since then I've learned a lot about colour theory, but at the time I decided to just use a pre-made palette I found online. I also decided that I would use a very small canvas size, since less pixels means less drawing. So I drew up a background for the main menu and intro to the game, which I later animated, and I think it turned out quite nice. Next on the list was to find a way to put text on the screen for the player to read. I programmed up a classic text box system, which reads the text character by character and has a little icon flashing in the bottom right when it's time to click. You can also ask a question in the text box and prompt the player to say yes or no. After reading the intro, the player is taken to the island map screen, and from there they visit the 10 locations, so I drew portraits for all of this. I didn't animate them because I didn't want to run out of time without finishing the main loop first. Speaking of, I made it so when the player visits a location from the island map, it reads out a clue to them and then sends them back to the map. They can't go back to the location, and if they check their bag in the top right, they can reread any clue they've gotten. All the game needed to be playable from start to finish was a way to submit your guess. So I drew a little courtroom that when you visit you are prompted to lock in the culprit, their location, and since weapon didn't make sense for kidnapping an animal, I replaced it with their motive instead. If the player guessed correctly, they're congratulated. If they guess wrong, they're reprimanded, and either way the game loops back to the main menu where the player can go again with a fresh puzzle and fresh names for everything. With the basic loop done, I decided to work on the most important bits. Now the game technically worked, but at this point there was still only around 6 templates of the clues, and these were allowed to repeat, so the puzzles generated were quite bad. So I focused on improving the quality of clues. I added in clues for each type of relation between suspect, location and motive, as well as the inverse of these clues. I also added clues related to the gender of the suspects and the position of locations on the island. I even made some fancy clues which give you a little riddle with 2 statements, such as one statement is true and one statement is false. I had to make sure that the statements in these clues were not also 2 statement clues, or else the puzzles could get very confusing very quickly. With these changes, the game was way more fun. It felt like a real game at this point. However, time was running low. There were about 4 hours left before the end of the jam, including the time I'd need to spend uploading the game, and I hadn't even started working on the minigames. I knew there was no chance I'd finish all of them in time, but I decided to just do as many as I could. I added blackjack to the pub since it's a very simple game, only needed some sprites for cards, and then I decided to add Binero to the florist. Binero is a game played on a grid of white and black squares where you can't have more than 3 in a row. It's like Sudoku, where you start with a little information and have to fill in the grid based off that. The UI for Binero wasn't my best work, and the puzzles are also not randomly generated, but it works fine, which is good enough for a crunch. Anyway, with these done, it was now time to put up my itch page and make the game playable in browser. I submitted my game and breathed a sigh of relief. Overall, I spent about 20 hours working on this game over the 4 days, and I'm proud of the game I made. I didn't get to add all the minigames or animate everything, but the Myrtle-inspired puzzle game part worked perfectly, and I was really pleased with the results. I also learned a lot during the jam about making a game in such a short time frame. Number one takeaway is just how important music and sound are. I didn't add any to this game, and you really notice it. In my last game jam entry, I had one royalty-free song looping and sound effects I made myself, and even that adds so much character and vibe to the final product. Next time I do a game jam, I will definitely not neglect sound or music. Takeaway number 2 is that since it was a 4-day time frame, I assumed I wouldn't need to give much thought to planning. Without going into the boring details, that was very wrong, and I think I could have added so much more to the game if I had planned both the design and the way I spent my time better. After doing this jam, I actually feel that my assumption was completely wrong. The super short time frame actually makes planning way more important because you have way less time you can afford to waste. All in all, I came away from this jam feeling proud of what I'd done and feeling better prepared for future jams. If you're interested in playing the game I made, it's linked in the description below, and if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing. I plan on making more games in the future, and more videos about them. If that interests you, stick around. Also, speaking of future jams, at the end of this month there's the GMTK 2025 Game Jam. I'm going to make a game for it, so if you want to see how that turns out, come back in about a month.